discussing a lot of different things about rhythm. So this is all about feeling pulse, being able to subdivide that pulse, and then being able to go in and out of different time signatures. So we're going to go over a whole bunch of stuff like that, and then I'll answer your questions afterwards. So I hope everybody's having a good evening, and we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. If you like videos like these, subscribe. I'm live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and I post a video every single Tuesday. So the first thing we want to know about rhythm is basically a certain time signature called 4/4, what that means and how to feel it. So this is the most common time signature, and you've probably come across it before. If you've ever counted to 4, like when you're starting a song off, or if you ever count to 4 to keep track of where you are in a song, that song is in 4/4. So that's a very simple, straightforward thing there. Sydney, Ohio, nice. Yeah, so wherever you guys are from, you can go ahead and enter that in the chat. That's really cool. See where everybody else is watching from. But basically 4/4 means you'll be counting to 4. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. You can go at different tempos. You go slow, 1, 2, 3, 4, or you could do a faster tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4. But as long as that's where the beat is felt, if that's where you naturally bob your head along to, then that means we're in 4/4. All right. Hey, Robert, how's it going? Hey, Zach. Very cool. It's cool seeing where all you guys are from. But basically, there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do in 4/4. But the first thing is just feeling that pulse. So what I want to do right now is just play some quarter notes. So I have a metronome app on here. I believe this one was a free one called B Metronome or something. Can't remember what the B stands for. Then I opened the wrong thing anyway. It's just a phone app though, and all it does is it gives you these different tempos to play at. So let's start with a real easy, straightforward tempo. We'll go at 60 beats per minute. Oh, we're going to change the sound. There we go. So you can hear it clicking along. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first thing we want to do is just be able to count to 4 with that over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Super basic stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we feel really confident that we're counting right with the click, we should start trying to play some notes with that click. 2, 3, 4. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to get used to doing that first. And if you're not sure if you're doing a good job on it or if you're missing the notes, one thing that helps is record yourself and play it back. I know this seems super basic, but you'd be surprised how hard it can be at slower tempos. So if you want to challenge yourself, instead of trying to do it fast, try going ultra slow and see if you can play right with it. Like I think 40 would be pretty hard to do right in time. So seconds aren't too bad. 60 beats per minute is equivalently 1 note a second. But if we do 40 beats per minute, it's a lot harder. It takes a lot more concentration. Anything slower than that, and you probably want to subdivide to keep track of where the beat is. So now you might be asking, well, what are subdivisions? What do we mean by subdividing? And no, I don't mean like the Rush song subdivisions, and I don't mean like little, neighborhoods in the suburbs or anything like that. But I do mean splitting that beat into equal sections. So like, let's say that's our quarter note at 40, right? It's really slow. It's hard to keep track of it, right? See, I missed it there. That's how hard it is to keep track of it. Well, one thing we could do is we could add something right in the middle of the 2 clicks to help our brains keep track of it. And then we kind of ease our way into it. If we're a little out of time at first, we can adjust until we've got them all in time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say and in between. So it'll be like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I can play that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So one thing that you could do is if you're trying to play quarter notes at a slow tempo like this, is in your head you can count the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but on the bass just play the numbers. Just play where the numbers are. 1. And it helps you stay on time. It helps you keep track of where you are. So what we're doing there is we're counting eighth notes. So I know this is like really a beginner kind of thing, but it really helps to be able to subdivide slow rhythms to stay in time there. Yes. So as far as this U bass, Seth, the reason I'm playing this one is I actually started with the other one and realized the batteries were dead. So I had this one really close, and so I just picked it up and started playing it. Took the thumbnail right before realizing the batteries were dead. So there you go. So now we've got the idea of subdividing into eighth notes. That's what we were doing there, by the way. I don't think I said that. So when we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we're counting eighth notes. So I'm going to show you what those look like on paper. At the beginning of our music, we'd see 4, 4. So we'd see a 4 on top and a 4 on bottom. That's our time signature. The top number is telling us that there are 4 beats in each measure, and each measure is a little unit separated by a line. So anything between 2 lines, or between the beginning and the first line, or between the second line and the end. Usually there would be a bar at the end to let you know that we're at the end of a thing, but I didn't write that. But I didn't put that on here there, but normally there would be a line at the end to let you know we're at the end of the measure, the beginning of the measure. And so this first measure is just 4 quarter notes that we just count 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the second measure, we have eighth notes, and we'd count those 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's why 8 of those fit in a measure. Only 4 of those fit in a measure. You can see if you know fractions, of course, that's just quarter notes split a measure of 4, 4 into 4 equal parts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we're just splitting it into 4 equal parts. And then eighth notes split it into 8 equal parts. And then we even have 16th notes. So I just included those on the bottom so that you can see them. And 16th notes, we're splitting each beat. So each pulse, we're going to split that into 4 equal parts. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So for really slow rhythms, for really slow tempos, you may want to be subdividing into 16th notes to keep track of that. So we're going to start with 40 and just try that here. So first we've got our quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we got eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then 16th notes. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So we can play those. But we're still feeling the same pulse. We're just splitting that into smaller pieces. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So you see, my tendency is to rush a tiny bit when I'm counting 16th notes. So we got our quarter notes, 2, 3, 4. Then our eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then our 16th notes, 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. And so that's kind of how we can feel those different subdivisions all in 4, 4. So once again, 4, 4 means 4 beats in each measure, and then that bottom 4 that I didn't explain earlier, that's what kind of note gets the beat. So in this case, it's quarter notes. So that's why that bottom number is like a fraction that's some sort of quarter. So it's like you're saying there are 4 quarters in each measure, 4 quarter notes in each measure, and the quarter note gets the beat is what the top number means, which is mean the quarter note feels the pulse in this case. It gets a little bit trickier when we get into where the bottom number is 8, because there's a different way to feel the pulse when we get into those. So we'll have to talk about those in a second. But I want to make sure everybody's with me on this. I'm just going to read through on there. Let's see. Change batteries. Right. So the thing about changing batteries during times where I'm trying not to go out as much as possible because everybody's getting sick is I didn't stock up on batteries before all this. So yeah, so I don't actually have spare batteries. I just have some, so I'll have to get those at some point or order some on Amazon or something. But also, I like this one, and I like getting to use the different ones. But I didn't want to really switch it out because once again, it's just a matter of time. It would take an extra 30 seconds or a minute, and so I was already starting at 7:01 after realizing the batteries were in the wrong place, or the batteries were dead. So that's 4/4. So you could also do a time signature called 3/4, where on the top it would be a 3, and on the bottom it would be a 4. And so that means we only have 3 quarter notes in each measure. So that would sound like, you can do the same tempos. We'll start at 60 to make it a little bit easier. That'd be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And a lot of the times what distinguishes this from 4/4 is sometimes we could hit the first note a little bit harder. 1, 2, 3. So if I wasn't counting, you could still tell it was 3/4. So that's called accenting the beat. So you could think of 3/4 as strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak, where we're hitting the note a little bit harder on beat 1. We're accenting the note just a little bit so that you can really feel that that's part of that pulse. So yeah, 3/4 is considered a waltz. So that's why we're doing this strong, weak. So if you did a little bit faster, you can hear that waltz feel. Let me do it at 100 just to get an idea. Strong, weak, strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak. So yes, 3/4 is a waltz feel typically. All right. So we've got that. We can play in 4/4, where everything we just count to 4. And if we were playing in 4/4, we don't have to just play quarter notes or eighth notes or 16th notes. We can do a combination of them, right? So let's say we were doing 2 quarter notes and then 4 eighth notes. So that'd be like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and if you notice, if I'm counting eighth notes, if I have some eighth notes anywhere in the piece, I'm going to count eighth notes from the beginning. If I have 16th notes in the piece, I'll probably start counting 16th notes from the beginning just to be able to keep track of everything. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a is another example of that. I'm counting 16th notes the whole time, but when I'm just playing quarter notes, I'm not playing the extra ones, but I'm still counting them. So like, let's say we're doing a full measure of quarter notes, but we're counting 16th notes. Well, that'll sound like this. Well, let's do 60. So we got quarter notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a eighth notes and 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So that's a good way to get used to those different feels. Okay, so now that we've got all that down, if we were playing in 4/4, it would sound like that. You could split it up there. You're hearing me count to 4. If we were playing in 3/4, you might hear something like this. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2 is a really common rhythm. So that's a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, and then quarter note. 1, 2, and 3. So you can count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. You get the idea. So that's a really common rhythm that you could do. If you played eighth notes all the way through, you could do the same thing, just hit beat 1 a little bit harder so it feels like that's the downbeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, so let's see. Wouldn't 3/4 be considered a traditional waltz? Yes. What about a song like Take 5 or Pink Floyd's song Money? Well, those are a little bit more challenging. Those time signatures are 5/4 and 7/4. So you can do this basically. 1/4 would be kind of an annoying time signature, so we don't see that very often. But we see 2/4, which would just be 1, 2, 1 and 2, and 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E, and you get the idea. We're only counting 2, no matter how we're subdividing it, we're only counting to 2. 3/4, we've got the waltz feel. 4/4, 4/4 is the most common time that we have. Sometimes you'll just see a C written where the time signature would be, and that means we're in 4/4 because that's C stands for common time. Okay, and then for Seth's question, where he asked, what about songs like Take 5 and Pink Floyd's Money? Well, they decided that they didn't really like any of those other options. They thought they were kind of simple or boring, or just it's been done so much that it's time to do something slightly different. So Take 5 uses 5/4, so it's kind of a little bit of a pun, because you'd be like taking 5 minutes, you're taking a break or something, but really they're referring to the time signature. And the bass line in that's like da dun da dun 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 da dun da dun dun dun. So it's got a little swing rhythm to it too. So in addition to being in 5, it's got some swung eighth notes. So you count like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, which we haven't talked about yet. So that's got a little bit more stuff there, but you can still feel the pulse as 5. Dun 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 dun. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. And in that particular song, they accent 4 and 5. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3, and then I'll let you know that they're ending the pattern to start again. So the drums are going to hit 4 or 5. So that and really that bass line too. 4 5 4 5, right? And I think the bass line just goes 1 boom 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 dum dum dum. And I think Mission Impossible, that almost sounds like Mission Impossible too. Yeah, so Mission Impossible themes in 5 as well. But good call asking about those. And then Pink Floyd's Money. 1 2 and 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3. So you get the idea. So those are kind of a little bit more challenging. The middle of the song is in 4/4, but that main groove all the way through the verses and the chorus and stuff, that's all in 7. Then the interlude with the guitar solos in 4, and then you're back in 7 at the end of the piece. And then I believe it's just kind of 2/4 or 4/4 at the very end. Very, very, very end. All right. Yeah, Take 5 and Mission Impossible, they had the same feel where they're accenting 4 or 5. Honestly, because Take 5 is probably the most well-known song in 5/4, it's hard to get away from that feel. But Rush has a lot of songs that have sections in 5/4, and there are a lot of other bands that do too. And the challenge there is making them not sound like Take 5. So instead of accenting 4 and 5, we want to just accent different beats within the pattern. But it's easier to feel when you accent 4 and 5. All right. Yeah, and you're welcome on the Pink Floyd Timing. That's a fun song to play. I like playing that one with the band that I'm in. It's even more fun to try to sing and play. Try that sometime. It's a nice little challenge. But we're getting way far away from what I was trying to do. So I'm gonna bring it back. So we've got all sorts of different time signatures. That's good with 4. So we're in, we could do 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4 if you really want to. I don't see that one as much, but you could do 6/4. But a lot of times when you count it like that, 3/4 and 6/4 would just sound very similar. So there's not really as much of a point to making it 6 specifically, unless your pattern doesn't repeat halfway through, then you might. And then 7/4. And I don't usually see things like 8/4 for the same reason. You could just do 4/4 and have it be 2 measures instead of 1. So why make it different and add that? And 9/4, I hardly ever see. If I see numbers bigger than that on the top, I usually see them over 8 on the bottom. So like I see 7/8 a lot of times, 9/8, and occasionally 11/8, but usually not much higher than that. Although sometimes when we get into 16th notes, where the bottom number of the time signature is 16, which is kind of strange. So instead of being like 4/4, you could have like 3/16. You could also have 17/16 if you're really crazy. And I think the only times I've seen time signatures that crazy, is in Dream Theater songs. So there are bands like Dream Theater that just like thinking math this whole time, and they're all about subdividing these different sections and remembering, different lengths of time coming first and next and stuff, but honestly, I think it's overkill because it's really hard to feel the pulse through an entire song like that. And don't even try dancing to it because you'll lose your step and you'll get really confused, because unless you're a choreographer and you make some part that goes with every single section, which would still be a nightmare of a choreographer job to do that. But yeah, back to some more simple things. We've got all the fours, right? So when an 8 ends up on the bottom, so like let's say 3/8, 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8 are very common ones. They're felt a little bit differently in general. If you have something like 7/8, it's going to be felt a little bit different than what I'm talking about right now. But there's a default way to count these. So I'm going to write this out for you on a little piece of paper. We're going to go with the most common one. The most common one that I ever see that has an 8 on the bottom as far as time signatures is 6/8. Now, the idea of 6/8 notes is not that weird, right? Like you just write out 6/8 notes and you're like, okay, cool. But I'm going to show you a measure of 6/8, and I want to see if you can figure out what's weird about it. I'm not going to give you long to figure it out, but that's a measure of 6/8. And you might notice something weird about those eighth notes when you compare it to how I did the eighth notes here in the second measure of 4/4 up above it. What do you notice about this that's different than this? Do you see that there? So what's different about those two things? I'll give you all a second to answer, and then I'll kind of go ahead and do that. So this is for people on the replay too. If you know the answer, let me know. But what's weird to me about it, right, is if you look at that, here's the answer. They're grouped in threes. Why are they grouped in threes? That's so weird. There are 3 notes and then 3 notes. But they're eighth notes, right? So in a measure of 4/4, we'd have 8 in a measure, but since we're in 6/8, we only have 6 eighth notes in a measure. That all makes sense. But why are they grouped together in threes? And here's the kicker. Rather than feeling the pulse as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only twice as fast because it's eighth notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and the 6/8 time signature implies a feel. And the typical thing is the pulse is really, instead of being 6 different things, is just going to be 2. So I'm going to draw little accents underneath the notes that you'll accent. That is where the pulse would fall. So do you see those little alligator mouth things? Those are accents telling us to play those notes a little bit louder. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we were to repeat it. So that's kind of weird about 6/8 is that you feel it in groups of 3. The same is true with 9/8 and 12/8. So if we had 9/8, it would just be 3 groups of 3 eighth notes. So you could notate this in 2/4 and 4/4 and do all those things as well using what's called triplets. So what a triplet does is it splits one beat into 3 equal parts. So instead of, so let's get this idea. Eighth notes split one beat, not the measure, but one beat into 2 equal parts. That means between beat 1 and beat 2, we're splitting beat 1 in half, and we're saying and right in the middle, 1 and. So eighth notes split it into 2 beats. 16th notes split a beat into 4 parts, 1 E and a, right? So if we have this as our pulse, this is our beat, eighth notes, 1 and 2 and a 16th notes, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, right? So that's kind of the thing. What if we wanted to split it into 3 equal sections instead? Well, that's what triplets are. Triplet, triplet, triplet. And you could tell my first one wasn't super even. Triplet, triplet, but 3 equal parts, 3 equal parts. So you could notate them as triplets, and in a measure of 2/4 or 4/4, I'm just going to go with 2/4 since we're doing 6/8. It would look the same, basically. The only difference is to notate that they're triplets. When the time signature has a 4 on the bottom, we actually have to notate that that's the case. And the way we do that is we draw a little 3 above the triplets. So essentially, these could feel the same. See these little threes on top of the notes? They're telling you we're splitting the beat into 3 equal parts instead of our normal thing of splitting it into 2 or 4. But in 6/8, it's just implied. We don't have to really think about that. It's just the way 6/8 is generally felt. So instead of having to write that little 3 over every single set of eighth notes in the whole entire piece in 2/4, we could just do 6/8 and just write 6/8 at the beginning of the piece. And it's just an easier way to write it, and you don't have to think as much while you're reading through it. Hey, how's it going? How do you pronounce your Hayabusa? It's good to see you. Thanks for joining the live stream. But that's why we have 6/8, because we don't want to literally be writing triplets all the dang time in 4/4 and 2/4 and all this other stuff. So we have 6/8 would be like a measure of 2/4 with triplets. 12/8 would be like a measure of 4/4 with triplets. So hopefully that makes sense. But we just feel that pulse as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if we had 12/8, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So you might be asking, well, where do we hear these things, right? Like we hear 4/4 all the time. I probably don't need to give you examples of that. It's everywhere. Not every pop song, but about half the pop songs are there. But 6/8 and 12/8 happen a lot of times in ballads and in like slow blues songs. So if you ever heard of a slow blues, you might use that a little bit. All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad I can help you on this. Is it Rational Logo? Thank you. But basically, 12/8 happens a lot of times in slow blueses. So let's say we're playing a slow blues. Right? We're playing that pattern. So we get the idea from that. What we're doing there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we're playing these triplets, but we're not playing the middle one. So we're going in 12/8, we'd be going 1, 2, 3. So notice we didn't play on beat 2. We played 1, 3, 4, 6. We're skipping over the number in the middle of the groups of 3. So let me write out a measure of 12/8, and then let me write out what that other rhythm looks like. And we haven't really talked about rests before. I'm assuming that you guys have seen rests before, but I don't know if you have or not. So first, let me write out just a measure of 12/8 with all the eighth notes being played. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? And then I may have to write it underneath because I didn't leave myself a lot of room. An eighth rest looks almost like a little 7 with a ball on the end, and that just means don't play on that one. So if we were writing a blues like that, we just put those little 7s in the place of the middle note. Probably the easiest way to do that. The other way to do it is hold the first note out longer. So instead of going, we could hold it out and do that would be more like a triplet quarter, or well, we just call it a quarter note here. So that'd be like quarter, eighth, quarter, eighth, quarter, eighth. But I'm just gonna write it this way so it's easier to see on paper where we're being quiet for. Because on that one it's kind of a trickier concept. So I'm just gonna write this out just so you can see it on paper. So that bottom example. So that little 7 looking thing, honestly, I didn't make a ball on the end of all of them, I don't think. Didn't make it very noticeable. But do you see how in between where the middle eighth note would have been, there's this little like 7 looking figure with a ball on the end? that is our rest, our eighth rest is telling us to be quiet there. So we'd go 1, rest, 3, 4, rest, 5, 6, rest, 7. Sorry, can't count, skipping the numbers apparently. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's what we're doing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And actually on that last one, instead of doing the same thing at the end, in the last one, I'm adding a note in there and just playing that figure. So these, the way they are for the first 3 groupings, and that last grouping, I'd just play that rhythm instead. And that's a slow blues line in 12/8, if that helps. Anyone have any questions about this? Does that make sense? Armrest. Nice. Yeah, I'm not sure how to comment on TV either. I haven't figured that out. I know if you like cast it from your phone, you can probably comment on your phone while you're watching it on the TV, but I haven't done all that stuff. So yeah, it may just be better to have multiple devices. But thanks for tuning in, all you guys. This is awesome. But that to me really helps, having those different subdivisions basically. So when we're playing in 12/8, you could also notate that in 4/4 and say each grouping is just triplets. And you could still do the same thing where you note that they're triplets and you just note that the rest in the middle is still there and everything. And it would look very similar. So why don't we just say we're in 4/4? Because that feel will be throughout the entire song. So rather than having to waste all that ink, I guess that's really the main thing, and making it more confusing looking. Instead, we just know, oh, it's in 6/8 or it's in 12/8. Sorry, this time we're in 12/8. So that means we're going to have 12 eighth notes, but we just know default wise to split them into groups of 3. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So now we've got triplets, 16th notes, eighth notes. So let's mix them up a little bit. I'm going to go back to 4/4 and just write out, well, I'm running out of room here. I'll write on the bottom, kind of small. But if we were back in 4/4, we could do a measure of quarter notes first. Then I'm going to do a measure of eighth notes. I'm going to write them small, so I apologize for how close together these are going to end up. You'll see in a second. And now I'm going to write some 16th notes after that. Nine, 10, 11, 12. Actually, that's not the order I wanted to do them in. I wanted to do triplets next. Okay, so I got my triplets. I just got to write a 3 above each one. And then 16th notes after that. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Because the 16th notes are so close together, instead of drawing little balls on the end of the notes, I drew little lines. You'll see what I mean yet again. You can still kind of tell that they're 16th notes, even though for speed's sake, I kind of shorthanded them a little bit. So now we've got this bottom line here. Let's see if you guys can see that. So we've got quarter notes at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, then just regular eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then triplets, triplet, 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 or you could count them as 1 a lit, 2 a lit, 3 a lit, 4 a lit, and then that last little bit is 16th notes, and they're so close together it's hard to see them, but that's 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Okay. So I'm going to play that along with the metronome just to give you an idea of how all that works. Okay, 3/16. Yeah, so I guess some symphonies have stuff like 3/16 and other things like that too. But Dream Theater is notorious for going back and forth between all those crazy stuff, time signatures, Seth. So just to give you an idea. But yeah, symphonies definitely do have that. And then if you were in marching band might be another one that would have some crazy time signatures appear every now and then if you were doing the competitions. But that's about that. So let's pick a tempo. 60 beats per minute sounds good again. So our quarter notes are going to equal seconds, basically. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to count eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Triplets. 1 a lit, 2 a lit, 3 a lit, 4. Then 16 notes. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And that was a terrible example because when I went to go to do triplets, I rushed them basically. So the hardest part about getting into triplets from eighth notes is that they're almost like a completely different type of thinking. When you're splitting stuff into twos and fours, it's really easy to go back and forth between them usually. When you start splitting stuff into threes right after splitting stuff into twos, it's like your brain has to adjust. So it's like, how quickly can you adjust is the question there. So I play through that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and triplet, 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 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Yeah, so going from eighth notes to triplets, especially at slower tempos, is hard to do and takes a little bit of practice, but you'll get the hang of it, and that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. I wonder in symphony, is the bass section divided into segments? Okay. Looks like Seth already answered you on that. So that could mean a whole bunch of different things, I guess, with the segments. I mean, we have different measures, right? Every piece of music has different measures like this. But the symphonies themselves are split up into different pieces. So I'm not sure if you're talking about measures like this, where they're just all separated into 4/4 or whatever. And you can have time signature changes where like you have a measure of 4/4 and then they notate another time signature, and that would look like, let's say I just threw one on the end of this exercise. I said, well, the last measure, instead of playing 4/4, I want to play in 3/4. I'm just going to play quarter notes in 3/4. Well, they would just write 3/4 after a line, and hopefully I'm holding that in the shot. And you see where it says 3/4. Now you know we're in 3/4, and we just play 3 notes there instead of 4. So we can have songs with time signature changes. Money has a time signature change in the middle. I think I was telling you that Pink Floyd's song "Money" starts in 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? But then when it gets to the middle and it starts doing, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that's a totally different feel. But that's a lot of stuff to cover today. So how many of you guys understand all of that? And how many of you are getting a little bit confused? Donate, I need more paper. Ironically, if I had thought about that I was going to be doing this tonight, I had just gone to Walmart and I could have totally bought like a dry erase board. And that's what somebody said last time when I was writing on this paper and running out of stuff. And yeah, I need to invest in a dry erase board. I actually have a marker and erasers and just never got the board. But if I get a board, I could just hang it right here behind me. And that would probably work. Just scoot over to the side a little bit. But that's it. So the other thing, so now we've got our answer on like how do we subdivide in 4/4? How do we play in different time signatures and do all that crazy stuff, right? But you can play different rhythms in 4/4. You can play a different rhythm in 6/8, right? We don't have to play all the notes in the measure. So we already talked about rests a little bit, and we talked about what I'm saying right now with the blues. But what are some other styles that go along with certain things like this? Seth already said 3/4 is known as a waltz in a lot of cases. So it's not that every time you see 3/4, it's going to exactly feel like a waltz, but every waltz will be in 3/4, if that makes sense. So typically they're the same thing. Quite confused, but it's very interesting. Okay, so where did you get confused? Because we can go all the way back to the beginning and just recap the beginning if you missed that, or we can talk about some other things. I think the main thing is when we do weird time signatures, like just master 4/4 first before we talk about all these other things, right? So if you were to go through this again, get this idea down. We got quarter notes. So they're going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 when we're in 4/4. There are 4 quarter notes. So that's telling you the number of beats in a measure, which means if we were counting this piece, we'd count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 to keep track of where we are while we're playing. And that's where we'd pat our foot. That's where we'd bob our head. That's where we're feeling the beat, right? And then the bottom number is telling us that beat we're feeling is indeed quarter notes. There are 4 of them in a measure, and there are 4 what? 4 quarter notes. And you could think of this as telling you that by thinking about a fraction. If you have like 1/4, that's known as a quarter of something. If you have 2/4, sure, you could call it a half, but you could also call it 2 quarters, right? So if the bottom number is a 4, we're thinking in terms of quarters. And so that's telling you quarter notes is what we're thinking about. That's the way that I kind of remember it, at least. And every one of these names is based off of if you were in 4/4, right? So a quarter note, what is it a quarter of? It's a quarter of a measure of 4/4. So just know that 4/4 is like the default time, if that makes sense. So then when we're subdividing into eighth notes, right? So eighth notes look like this. They're beamed together on top. And a lot of times they can be grouped into 2s or grouped into 4s if you have a lot of them in a row like this. But they can be grouped into either. So when you're doing that, the first one is going to land where the first beat is, right? But then the second one, when they're beamed together like this, it's telling you it's going to happen a little bit quicker than the next quarter note would have happened. So that means if we were counting 1, 2, 3, 4, the second eighth note is going to happen between 1 and 2. So 1, 2, 3, you get the idea. There's a note in between them. So if that's the case, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we can call them ands, these ones that are in between. We can count those. We can keep track of those by adding a word in the very middle of the space between 1 and 2, of the time between 1 and 2. So if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, you split that exactly in half. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But our beat that we're feeling is still the quarter notes, right? We're still feeling the quarter notes, but we have some notes that are happening in between them. And that's how we notate it with eighth notes. So hopefully that makes sense. Right. So that's kind of simple, that simple part when you're saying got a little bit confused. Okay. I'm just going through all these comments. Y'all are having some fun conversations here. Right. So that's that basic thing that we're going through there with the quarter notes and the eighth notes, right? So we got to get that before we do anything else. Like who is it that said it? Hayabusa? Theory is like a pool. You really can't enjoy the swim until you dive in. So this is diving in. We got to dive in with the beginning part, and then we can jump into everything else, right? So the 16th notes here, well, now this is beat 1, this is beat 2, this is beat 3, this is beat 4, and we're splitting it into 4 equal parts. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So that's like the default way to count it in a lot of places. It's saying 1E and I'm not sure if that's a worldwide thing or if that's just a US thing or if that's just particular regions thing, but I figure with the internet being around that it's pretty widespread that we can count 16th notes like that. But notice how there's still a 1 in there. There's still an and in there. So we got 1 and. That's going to be 1. We're going to skip over a note. That's going to be where and is. So if I write the ands as little like plus signs, hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to write the counting in underneath them for the visual learners. You know what? I shouldn't bear down on the U base. I'll probably end up with Sharpie permanently on the U base. So why don't I just do this instead? All right. So notice when I write these out that the numbers are represented in all examples, right? And those numbers would be where a metronome would keep track of things, or where you'd be patting your foot, or all those things, right? So if I turn that on, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? But notice that the numbers still happen in the same spots. I'm just adding an and to keep track of those notes that are happening in between. Here, the 1, 2, 3, 4 is still going to happen in the same spots, but now we got to split it into 4 equal sections, so they're going to be really fast notes. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So hopefully that makes sense. So it's just a way to keep track of all those notes. So if all that had already made sense to you, that's just the basic stuff. And splitting into 16th notes is probably the most complicated part there. It's hard to play 16th notes because they're fast, depending on what tempo you're at. But if you were starting at a slower tempo, like instead of one beat or one pulse equaling a second, you could make one pulse every 2 seconds, which is 30, which is really hard to keep track of. But if you subdivide it, it's a little easier. So that would be counting the 8th notes. 3 and 4 and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and so you get the idea. Subdividing can kind of help you stay in time with those slower timings if you're good at counting those things a little bit faster, if that makes any sense. Okay. Cool. So now that you've got that, then the other time signatures are just different ways of counting. So instead of counting to 4, we could count to 3. So that bottom number would still be 4. Let me find my example. That bottom number, I never wrote 3, 4 out. No wonder that's confusing. I'm going to write it sideways on the page. Yes, become a patron, donate, and then I will be able to afford a larger amount of paper, or maybe even a dry erase board. And maybe what I'll have to do is hang the Primus picture over the dry erase board. Will that help, Seth, so that they're both still there? Okay. Enough silliness aside. 3, 4, instead of having 4 pulses in each measure, we just have 3. So the measure, I'm separating each measure with a line. That just means we start our count over when we get to the next one. That line is called a bar line. You can call these measures, or you can call them bars. The space between where all the space where all the notes are before the line and after the line, in between lines, usually if I kept going, kept writing stuff. Okay. So 3, 4 means we only have 3 beats in the measure, which means we're only going to feel 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 if I was pointing at them. But we could still add 8th notes in between and go 1 and 2 and 3 and, which I didn't leave a lot of room to write this in, but let's see. Here we're going to group them into 2s. And then 16th notes. Oh, there's no way you're going to be able to read that. Never mind. I'll give up on 16th notes because I don't have enough room to write them there. I'll write them underneath. So here we go. So we could count 8th notes. We'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And I just did it twice just to give you an idea. I'm going to do the bottom one twice just to give you the idea of how it would happen if we repeated them too. So that's 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a. So after we get through the ones associated with beat 3, we start our counting back over at 1. And that would feel like a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and it's no matter how you split it, it still feels bump 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 bump. So it's like you're feeling two different kinds of pulses. You're feeling the overall 3 beats, 3 quarter notes, but you're also feeling one a little bit stronger. So you could feel it. You could feel 3, 4 in just one giant pulse. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or you could feel it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if that makes sense. So it kind of has an implied 1, and waltzes are usually a little bit faster than a lot of 4/4. Well, that's not true. They're usually not super slow. I'll just put it that way. All right. I'm going to see, anyone have any questions here? It'd be unfair to other watchers to repeat from the beginning, only for me. Thanks. Well, here's the thing. Some of the other people watching might not have caught it. So not everybody's vocal on these chats, right? On these live streams. So I think that this was just a good point in going more in depth. So it's not just repeating, but it's just giving a little bit of a visual example with what we're doing. So I actually appreciate you mentioning that. But now we've kind of gone through everything, and I'm not going to go through 12/8 again and 6/8 again and all that other stuff, because I think that was explained earlier, and you can kind of just go back in and do that. But I do think having a basic understanding is super important. And that was the point of this video. So if I can go a little bit more in depth, I think it'll actually add to some other people's value too. And if not, they can go back to the beginning and just watch that first half of the video again. All right. So now we got some questions that are unrelated to rhythm, which that's pretty much it for the lesson. If you have questions about the rhythm stuff, you can put those in there too. But I'll go ahead and get to some just, U-bass related questions, just whatever you guys want to ask. So Darko MTC, I think. It's really hard to read the text. I have it so small on the screen. Watches U-bass's reviews and asks, is flight U-bass nice? The flight U-bass, I had just learned that this existed like 2 days ago. So I have no real idea of what their U-bass is like. Maybe someday in the future I'll do a review on that too, but I imagine they're all right. I imagine they're not a bad instrument. I just, they're so new. I haven't gotten a chance to play one to really give a honest review on them, but I look forward to playing one in the future. So I'll try to have more information on that soon. I don't even know how long they've been out, but I only heard about them very recently. All right. And hello. Got Mark. All right. You're very welcome. But I've been curious about that too, because I know some people in the ukulele community that are sponsored by Flight, and they're really cool people. So it would be pretty cool to, to see what their sponsor does for them, what the quality of those instruments are. Because there's some people I know, like Bernadette, that has a signature Flight ukulele. And so I wondered about their U-bass that just came out. All right, favorite songs that change time signature. Well, I think the simplest example of a good song that changes time signature is Money. It goes from 7/4 to 4/4 in the middle. So that means it goes from this feel to this feel. And the way it transitions is honestly with some triplets, which is kind of cool. Right, so that part of the song, when you hear it go, that's where they transition. So they do a full measure of triplets, and that full measure is a 4/4 instead of 7/4, and that's how you know they're transitioning into 4/4. But then when they come out of it, there's no warning other than that line happening the third time that it does in the song. After the guitar solo, the very end of the guitar solo, that lets you know you're going back to 7. So that to me is probably one of my favorites, just because it's so clear and concise. If you're wanting the craziest example of time signature changes, that would be Dream Theater's Dance of Eternity. So if you look up Dance of Eternity, there's a guy that beatboxes, and he did a cover of, or he kind of beatboxed along with it. I don't know if it's really a cover because I think he has the song playing the entire time. But he holds up note cards with the different time signature changes. And they're like 100 time signature changes. Or, if you find his video, it'll tell you exactly the number of time signature changes somewhere in his description. I think he tells you. And then, or maybe he puts it on the screen, but he literally holds up a note card every time that the time signature changes. And it's wild. It's like unrealistic to think that most people would ever spend the time to memorize all those different time signature changes. But Dream Theater did, and if you ever get to see them play it live, or if you've ever seen them play it live in the past, let me know, because it's phenomenal. It's cool stuff, but it's almost like their reason for doing it is just because they can, kind of almost like treating it like a sport. It's not like just purely for musical reasons, just for listening reasons or something. It sounds wacky and all over the place. So I like it, but I like the way it sounds, but I know it's not everyone's cup of tea too. Kala Passenger. The G string doesn't sound equally, almost mute with the amp. That quiet. Any simple solution? All right, so the Kala Passenger, I believe, comes with the Thundergut strings, the white polyurethane strings, kind of beige colored ones. Basically, it's not pushing down evenly on the bridge, and they're known, not just the Passenger, but a lot of the lower end Kalas are known for having an issue with this. And I think it's because of the type of pickup that they use is kind of like one piece, but it has to push down equally on the strings. And of course, the thicker gauge string is just naturally going to push down harder on the pickup, which means it's going to pick up the vibrations better. So one thing you can do, which is kind of weird, I just tried this one time when I had an issue with that, and it sort of worked, surprisingly, was I kind of loosened all the strings just a little bit and tightened them in different orders. And sometimes it's like if you figure out the right order, I'm not sure which one to tighten last, which one to tighten first. But sometimes if you tighten them in different orders, that can help a little bit. But honestly, it's an issue that a lot of them have. So one thing that you could do, if that doesn't get it enough, is you could change your EQ. It's going to change your tone. But if you have more treble, it'll pick up the treble notes better, and the higher pitched notes are all on the G string. Those are higher pitched than the other strings. So if you're boosting the treble and possibly the mids a little bit more than normal, that might help it be heard a little bit better. But that's not the ideal solution, I know. Another option is change to metal strings, which if you don't want metal strings, then I know that that's not a great solution for you if you prefer the rubber. But the metal strings just all have more tension, so they'll all make that contact a little bit stronger, and they get picked up pretty evenly. Sometimes just as you play, it gets a little bit better over time too, because I think the strings will stretch a little bit, and then you'll end up tightening them a little bit more, and maybe that'll put just enough tension to get them at the same volume. I've only had that issue with one or two of the U-basses, so try those different things, and if none of those work, then there may be something somebody else could do, but it might take a lot more work on the bass, and I don't want to tell you to do those kinds of things, figuring out how to raise the bridge, figuring out how to change the pickup out or anything like that. That's just too much work. Yeah, and they're all piezo, or however you pronounce it. I've never been good at pronouncing that word. Piezo pickups, or all that kind of pickup. All right. Bohemian Rhapsody, that definitely changes tempo. Does it change time signature though? It definitely changes tempo. I'm trying to think. No, that's still 4/4. So yeah, that one changes tempo a lot. So it might be going like 60 beats per minute, and then all of a sudden it'll jump up to 80 beats per minute or something. But I can't think of a spot in it that necessarily changes time signature, or it changes the whole way the beat is felt. It just kind of changes the tempo of it. I could be wrong. There might be some spots in it that I'm just not thinking of right now. Music time signatures. Bach did a classical piece where a couple announcers did that. Huh. Keep reading through these comments, see what your other questions are. So yeah, you could do that. So Hayabusa, yeah, pulling the strings off of there and setting them back on could kind of help a little bit. Might just be sliding the string over slightly or doing some weird things. All those things might help a little bit, but they're kind of hit or miss. So you could also try loosening the strings and tightening them in a different order, like tightening the G string first and then going through. And it's like, if that doesn't help, try going through and tightening the E string first. If that doesn't help, try tightening the middle two first and then move outwards. But one of those things might help a little bit. But that is an issue with some of the less expensive U basses. I don't know if it's an issue on the $400 and up range, but with anything 300 or below, kind of hit or miss. With the rubber strings specifically, because they just don't put as much tension on the bridge. They don't put as much pressure. That's what I'm trying to say, pressure. If you switch from Thunderguts to flat wounds, any changes to nut or tuning pegs? All right, Dave, that's a really good question. Honestly, I haven't had to switch from those. I switched from round wounds to flat wounds, so I don't have a great answer. I'd like to think that you don't, because they're already thicker strings and everything, but you might end up with higher action. So, there's that. So if you had to make adjustments, you might have to make little indentions in the nut. Just you might have to widen them a little bit, like to make it sit lower on the neck. But I haven't heard of people having to do that, so I would assume that you don't have to. But if the action ends up a little bit higher, then you might want to. But just be very cautious doing that, I'd say. Note that you're also going to have to push down harder anyway, because the string tension on the flat wounds is a lot more than the rubber strings. So just be prepared that it's going to feel more like pushing down the strings on a full-size electric bass, a full-scale electric bass, than the rubber strings, which are really easy to push down. But great question, Dave. What about Another One Bites the Dust? I don't think that has a time signature change. It definitely uses 16th notes. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 1E and 2E and a 1 and 2 and a. So you're definitely using 16th notes and 16th note rest. It's a complicated rhythm. And a 1. So it has a pickup to measure 1, which we didn't talk about pickup notes, but that would just be like if you counted to 4, you'd come in before the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Does that make sense? 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and I can't do that same time at that speed. And a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So it plays on the E's and U's, and it's syncopated kind of line in that sense, but not odd time signatures, I don't think. Bum 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 ba da da dum da dum dum. Still 4/4. Bum. Yeah. So Another One Bites the Dust is still in 4/4. Yeah, and Find a Good Luthier is a really good answer too, because a luthier could do a whole bunch of different things. They could replace the nut for you. They might be able to replace this piece on the bridge that pushes the pickup down. They might be able to do little divots on the bridge. They might replace the pickup for you. It'll all cost money, but they might have better answers. There's a lot of things that are kind of over my head with in regards to doing work on the U bass, and yeah, I would definitely just take it into somebody and do that. And then it's also kind of like, if they messed it up, they'll probably be happy to fix it for you. Like, oops, sorry, Okay. Let's see. But honestly, unless you're doing radical changes to the instrument, there are plenty of useful type videos on YouTube, and I agree with that. And I'm thinking about kind of learning more into this and kind of maybe getting a practice bass on and just kind of going through some of those things so there's just more content on it, and then letting you know what worked, what didn't work. I know I did the truss rod video before on the Wanderer, and I kind of overdid the truss rod, and over time there was a lot more buzz on the higher frets. So lately I've been filing down the frets, and honestly, if you don't have the right tool for that, it can take forever to file down the fret, and then you end up with a whole lot of little metal shavings everywhere. But I realized that the buzz was just happening because of the highest fret. So it's almost like if I could just remove the 15th or the 16th fret, I think 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah. If I could just remove the 16th fret from my Wanderer, that buzz would be gone. And then I could just still push down on that part to get that note out. I just have to push down a lot harder without the fret there. But there's a ton of stuff. But I feel like just getting like a Kala's cheapest U-bass right now, and I believe it's something like $200. I feel like getting one of those and then doing a whole bunch of like string changing things, and just like buy a bunch of strings, change them out, let them set, record a little piece of a video, change them out, let them set, record a little piece. Because I know that there were a lot of people that watched my video on round wound versus rubber versus flat wound, and what was kind of upsetting a couple of people was just that they were on different instruments. And it's like, it's true, the pickups are a little bit different between the instruments, so it's not really a direct comparison of the strings. There is, the Journeyman's going to sound different with the flat wounds slightly than this bass would. So because of a different pickup and, all those other things. So my Facebook page, I have a Facebook page that's Stephen Cox Music. So I'll put it in the chat here. Let me make it a link, hopefully. I can spell my own name. Okay, so that should be that one. And then I made a Facebook page for the U-bass challenge. I call it U-bass challenge, and I did that one string challenge, and I made a Facebook for that. But I also made I'm also thinking about making a Facebook group around Stephen Cox bass that I'm just going to post like all these YouTube videos in, and maybe there'll be a way to, I don't think there's a way to organize them other than chronologically, but I was thinking about doing that, but I want to have more of a reason to do it than that, something more interactive that you guys can post on too. And the challenge is already doing that for me right now. So maybe in the future I'll start a group that's more based around this. But for now, the group that I have is the U-bass challenge on Facebook. And I think you can find it by just typing in the word U-bass space challenge, U-bass challenge, 2 separate words in the search bar. And you should be able to find that one there. And I believe that this one works. I'm going to hopefully be able to open the link in a new window and see if it works. Hopefully that won't hurt the connection. And that way I can tell you guys if it works or not. It appears to not be working. Okay. It opened the wrong thing. There it is. Okay. So it does seem to work. So yeah, you can just go to Facebook and you can like the page there if you'd like to find me on there. I have an Instagram and all sorts of other things too. You can also go to my YouTube Skype lessons if you're interested in taking Skype lessons. Got a link to Patreon, Instagram, maybe Facebook, I think, and Skype lessons. But yeah, that worked, but it's taking way too long to load, which probably means I'm overloading my computer. You're welcome, Jeff. But yeah, I'm on all those platforms. I even created a TikTok. I don't know how long that'll be there, considering that the U.S. is talking about banning TikTok. But basically, all I'm posting there is YouTube videos. I'm just a minute segment of the YouTube videos, or 45-second segment of YouTube videos over there. And on Instagram, a lot of times, if you want to see some of these, hear some of these songs kind of back to back without the lesson in there as well, you can just listen to the song itself over on Instagram. And then I post a lot of silly things, like if I get new U basses, or if I do something to it, I'll take pictures of them and stuff like that too. Awesome. Yep. And the web address is the same as the Facebook. It's just stephencoxmusic.com. I also have stephencoxbass.com. Right now, it just redirects to stephencoxmusic.com. But maybe in the future, I'll have something way more bass oriented, but we'll see. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Does anybody else have any questions? So those were some great questions going on earlier about the G string being quieter. I almost feel like I need to make a video on that. I need to make sure that I have a foolproof way of actually fixing it before doing that, instead of just posting like, you might try this, and if that doesn't work, you can try this, and then that's it. And then otherwise, good luck, But if I figure out a way to do that, then I'll help you out there. All right, well, have a good one. Thanks for hanging out so late at 2 a.m. over there. And let's see. That's it right now. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you had fun here. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them as a comment after the fact. Like I said, you can also find me on Facebook. I don't check the messages on the Facebook page as often, but I do still check them here and there. So it might take me a while to reply there. But if you have questions, just leave them as a comment on YouTube videos, and I'll usually get back to you. Today, I actually realized I missed a couple people from a few years ago, and I went back in and commented on a lot of those old posts. Thanks so much, and y'all have a good week, and I will see you guys next Tuesday. Although I've got a couple of small videos that I might start doing for a third day of the week. I'm not sure when I'm going to start releasing those yet. They'll be like simple things like how to tune, so it's not for everybody, but it's for people that just got their U-bass and they're like, now what do I do? It tells you how to use the tuner, or if that doesn't work, you can use your phone tuner and stuff like that. Just realized this tuning peg's coming loose. All right, guys. Well, have a good one and be safe out there, and I'll see you next week.